Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. This is David Hopper, Austin Bureau Chief with 360degreesound.com. Today, I'm joined by Ethiopian American vocalist, composer, and cultural activist Meklit. Meklit will be releasing a new EP on March 8th entitled Ethio Blue. The first single from that EP, Antidote, came out earlier this month, and that's available on all streaming services. Uh, Hello, Meklit. Thanks for joining us. Uh,
Hi, thanks for
uh,
having
of
me.
course. Wonder if you could maybe give an introduction to our viewers and readers who maybe aren't familiar with you and your music, just a little bit about your background and career and the music you make.
Yeah, of course. So, I was born in Ethiopia and I grew up mostly in Brooklyn and then moved to San Francisco. There's a lot of other cities in there, but those are like the main touchstones. And I like to think of myself as making the music that touches each of those places. So for me, being born in Ethiopia and growing up in Ethiopian family community, I'm really inspired by and bring in Ethiopian scales, rhythms, and especially the music of Ethio-jazz. In my years in Brooklyn, I was deeply influenced by American jazz and really, you know, absorbed that sound and a lot of like for example, my first ever performance was 12 years old singing Billie Holiday's God Bless the Child at my you know Brooklyn middle school.
Hmm.
But New York is where I learned jazz, and then I've been in the Bay Area for about 20 years now, and I started making music when I moved to the Bay Area. For me, the Bay Area really inspired me to become a singer-songwriter. This idea that, with simplicity, you can strum your truth. And so those three places and those three sounds, Ethiopian music, jazz, and singer-songwriter music, really come together to make the music that I make. I'm also a cultural activist. I am always involved in projects, initiatives, and organizations that think about the intersection of social change and creative practice. Um, I'm the co-founder and host of a podcast, a radio show, and a live show called Movement, which uplifts the songs and stories of immigrant musicians, and really thinking about how we can make new narratives of migration inspired by and led by the people who've experienced it. And also just it's like a part social commentary, part um world building project, but also part music discovery, because the music coming out of immigrant communities is just so badass and genreless and innovative. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's a little bit about me.
yeah, great. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, mentioned the Ethiopian jazz. I'm a big jazz fan myself, but I'm only vaguely familiar with Ethiopian jazz. I am somewhat familiar with Mulatu. I know he's kind of the father of it. I have a friend who played some of his records for me a while back. But wonder if you could maybe tell our viewers a little bit about Ethiopian jazz, the
Yeah.
characteristics, what kind of distinguishes it from maybe the jazz maybe most Americans are familiar with.
Yeah, so of course. So Ethio-jazz is a way of bringing Ethiopian traditional music, the scales, the pentatonic scales of Ethiopia, which are very particular. There's a whole set of very specific scales, into a relationship with um, like Western jazz. And to tell the story best, to like not make it abstract and, technical and theoretical, but to make it personal, I think it's always good to tell the story of Mulatu Astatke, Gash Mulatu Astatke. So he's the creator of Ethio-jazz, and he was the first African to attend Berklee College of Music. He graduated in 1966 and then went to New York and was immersed playing congas and vibraphone in the Cuban jazz and the Latin jazz scene, and was like, I can do this with our music too. The way that Cuban music was able to bring the traditional rhythms and approaches to music into jazz, he was like, I can do this with Ethiopian music. He went back to Ethiopia, he created Ethio-jazz, bringing Ethiopian traditional music into a relationship with jazz. And then, I think of myself as a part of a continuum, continuing that legacy. I came to the US as a refugee, and so in my youth, and like I'm deeply inspired by the way that Ethio-jazz lets me be like my full African diasporic self, right? Like it lets me like be in relationship to Black music that comes from, this place, the United States, while still maintaining my relationship to my culture. And you know how these things are. It's hard to talk about music because we use music to talk about the things that are hard to talk about. So sometimes you
Mm.
just got to press play. This is what
Right.
Ethiopia is.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say before I transition from this question is that, in like over 10 years ago, Murat Wastatke came to a show of mine in Ethiopia, and he basically said to me, "Hey, so what is your contribution to Ethio-jazz going to be? This is a living music. It has to continue to evolve." And so that conversation was transformative to me, and that became the kind of wellspring of the music that I make today.
Mm, awesome. Thank you. Uh, yeah, as as I mentioned earlier, your new EP is coming out March 8th, titled Ethio Blue. Yeah, the new single Antidote is out now. I wonder if you could maybe tell us a little bit what to expect from this EP.
Yeah, so I started writing the EP Ethio Blue back in 2019. And I don't know about y'all, but like the pandemic slowed a lot of stuff down, right? And at the same time I was pregnant writing these songs, beginning to write these songs. And I was also, it's so interesting. I was thinking about like, gosh, everybody is really worn out. People just seemed really tired, um, really like weighted, like the weight. I could feel the weight of the world when I was talking to my communities. And I was like, I want to write an album that's really about like nurturing, sustaining, and uplifting the heart. And that's was the origin of the EP as a whole. Um, so the songs are very heart-centered. Antidote is really about understanding our collective power, understanding that we have enough for all of us, but we have to, you know, reach out to each other and, kind of understand, like try to listen and understand where folks are coming from in order to really get to the solutions, but the power is ours. But I wasn't doing it in this kind of like political speak. It's really about the heart, really being centered in the heart. And, I named the album Ethio Blue after the title track. The title track is called Ethio Blue. And that I got really inspired by just thinking about the people that created the music that we love, and the lives that they lived to be able to sing with that kind of depth, to be able to play with that kind of depth, and often the kinds of intense challenges and pressures that they were feeling, Black people, in the US and in Ethiopia. And just thinking about, like, in Ethiopia there's this way that you get these incredible musicians who like flute players who will just play for the animals. They'll be shepherds and they'll play, and then you hear these recordings and you're like, what is happening? The glorious, glorious nature of this music. And just thinking about, like, the best music has a root in these folk spaces. And I just wanted to pay homage to that. And so it's an EP that's about healing, about understanding where we come from, understanding where our power comes from, and that there is enough for all of us.
Mm, great. Yeah, looking forward to hearing it. So how many songs will be on it?
It's a 6-song EP,
Okay, great.
produced by Dan Wilson, my very dear friend, who has just got finished winning a Grammy a week ago, for a song that he wrote with Chris Stapleton. So Dan
Oh
is a really
wow.
dear friend of mine, and we met at the TED conference in 2012 or 2013, and then just started working together and like love working together, and did
Great.
this
Yeah.
together.
You have any plans for a full LP or?
I have a full length coming out
Yeah.
next year, which
Oh,
is also almost finished already. But you know how these things are, like if there's a lag time, right?
yeah.
You dream it up, you record it, you mix it, you master it, you
Yeah.
wait. You get all your assets together, you get a plan, you get a strategy. So there's always a big delay. So yes, there will be a new record, a full length coming out about a year from now.
Oh, okay, great. Cool. Yeah, so I understand you've had a number of videos go viral in your home country of Ethiopia. As you mentioned earlier, you performed there. So it sounds like you're quite a star in Ethiopia. So I was wondering what it means to you to be having success there.
Well, I mean, I was born in Ethiopia, but I grew up in the States, and I never imagined that the music that I make, which is like some in Amharic and some in other Ethiopian languages, but mostly in English. I'm only a poet in English, as I like to say. Like, I never knew that it would have so much resonance there. And so it's just a feeling of a homecoming every single time. And I had this conversation once with a Peace Corps volunteer who came to a show of mine in DC. And he said, I found out about this show a month ago from an eighth grader in rural Western Ethiopia who said to me, this is what happens when Ethiopian music goes to the US. And it's like this kid in this class in a rural place, like, understands what I'm doing, understands what I'm trying to do. And so, like, in Ethiopia, I don't have to explain anything. Like, they get it all. They really, really understand the bridge that I'm trying to build. So it's a really interesting, it's a really interesting phenomenon, and not one that I expected, but one that means so much to me.
Mhm. Yeah. You before we started the interview, you mentioned you were in DC for a gig and have had a number of shows lately. Just wondering how people could see you live and maybe what to expect from your live show.
Well, the live show, I'll say, okay, so I've got a lot of shows coming up. Today we're in DC. I don't think this will go live today, or maybe it will. Saturday, February 17th, we're in New York at Joe's Pub. We're in San Francisco, March 9th at the Brava Theater. We're at Scripps College on April 4th. We have a bunch of other shows coming up that haven't been announced yet. So, stay in touch with me on Instagram or my website, Meklit Music, Meklit Music, and you can, find out about all the shows that are coming up. For me, that my job on stage is to be as free as possible, to find my freedom, to find, like, my full access to my inner voice and just follow it. And so a show, first of all, it better be better than the recording. Like, live is the jam. Live is where it's at. It's where the energy is. It's where the full force and fire of music can just, do what music is supposed to do, which is to heal us. So, my shows are kind of a journey through a lot of different emotions, but the deepest one underneath it is that I'm trying to find my space of the most freedom that I can have to invite others into their sense of freedom as well.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, I guess finally, if you want to just say a little bit more about your cultural activism and how our viewers can learn more.
Yeah, so my big cultural activist project right now is Movement, the podcast, radio show, and live show, which uplifts the stories and songs of immigrant, migrant, and refugee musicians. And so partly it's just like, hey, if you want to discover a whole lot of amazing music that's coming from immigrant communities all over the country and the world, you can find the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's Movement with Meklit Hadero. And I also have to say this because I've started to realize sometimes people will be like, get into my music and then be like, wait, how do you spell it? Or I can't remember. Like, what? Even if you just Google Ethiopian singer San Francisco, I come right up. So just, that's how you can remember. And yeah, so we just finished season 1, which is 19 episodes of the podcast, and season 2 launches in the spring.
Awesome. Great. Looking forward to checking that out. Yeah, thanks so much for speaking with us, and looking forward to hearing the EP, and best of luck in your upcoming shows.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank
Be well,
you.
everyone.
Take care. Bye.